The sound system in the auditorium is so amazing that I'm only slightly disappointed at the sound here. What is that buzzing? I generally say that if there is a mic, I'll use it, but maybe it could be lowered a little bit, or maybe we'll do it. Are you going to introduce me, or can I just start? Go ahead.
Taylor Marley, everybody.
So, Taylor Marley is, he's from, originally I guess people would characterize him as a slam poet. Most of you know slam poet. No, it's probably a lot. Right, the slam scene. But I think, you know, he's more of a performance poet in general. I don't think he wants to be defined as slam or page or stage or... So he's a performance poet. Can you turn that to I have a case. I have one. So I can tell you a lot about this guy, but I think I'm just going to dedicate the time so that you get to spend some time with him. He has traveled extensively. He performs all over now, colleges, high schools. It's very hard to get here. I got to see Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky. I think how we say it. Louisville,
Kentucky.
Kentucky.
Not Kentucky, but it sounds like one person's name. My name's Kentucky.
Kentucky. Right. All right. I got to see him, and I was wowed by his performance. And then, Mr.
And you stopped me after you were in Louisville,
yes,
grading AP exams.
Yes.
How many of you are there? 350 teachers.
Yes, 350.
Grade 1 million essays in a week.
Yes. And the highlight of that trip was not the performance that we did for an hour, right?
That's a lot.
No, it was the day after when we were back in the grading room. Taylor Marley came in and we were all sitting there. You have to imagine this aircraft hangar full of people, and there was like 350 English teachers sitting there with our heads down. And we had a poem to grade called, it was The Black Walnut Tree by Mary Oliver, which is a nice poem, but it's very, after 350,000 poems, you're kind of like,
And didn't you get, somebody would read it every morning?
yes, and every morning somebody would come out and read it like this, and we would have to listen, and it just killed the poem. And then Taylor Marley came in, he's like, I'm going to read the poem for you this morning, and he did it in the voice of Christopher Walken. The best thing I ever heard, and it just lifted our spirits, but anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Maybe he'll even do it for you in a minute. Who knows? All right, Taylor Marley.
I had thank you. I went to drama school in Oxford, and I'm a little bit of a ham and a mimic. So when I went to graduate school for poetry in the early 90s in Kansas, I found that my skills that I had learned in drama school were actually more appropriate, more germane to presenting a poem than what I was learning in graduate school. Germane? You're looking at your friend going, germane? I don't even know that word. It means, as far as I could define it, somebody Google it, germane, appropriate to a specific situation, something like that. That does not obtain, is another way you can do it. I'm afraid that skill set does not obtain here. Nobody uses the word obtain that way. But that skill set was very germane to my life as a performance poet. So I've always done interesting, at least I think they're interesting, parodies of certain characters. If you've ever watched, my best imitation is of the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland's, that's the Disney Alice in Wonderland. Alice is running after the white rabbit, the white rabbit, and she stumbles upon a tea party that is being held between the March Hare and the Mad Hatter. And she thinks it's a birthday party, and the Mad Hatter goes, "This is not a birthday party! It's an unbirthday party!" And so, it sounds like a drunk game. Come sit on my lap! very first, what Lee said, every morning they would have somebody come in, because his group of 100 or so people, all they did for the entire week was grade essays that y'all AP students had written on this one essay. It was the Mary Oliver poem. And Lee and all the other teachers, they just had to grade that one essay. And every morning, a different person would read it. And that was supposed to give the teachers a different perspective. And I just heard the way Lee was reciting it, reminded me of one of the very first poems that I ever wrote that clued me into the fact that there is a different skill set for performing a poem than there is for writing a poem. Here's a poem that I wrote in 1990, when all of you were how old? Negative something, okay. And this poem is called I Think I Could Be a Poet. And then I'll do Christopher Walken with my invitation, and then I'm going to answer some questions, and we'll see where we are. I think I could be a poet because I like to wear a lot of black, and I have never learned where in a line to breathe. I can say the same line twice and make it mean something else. I can say the same line twice and make it mean something else. I have studied the poets who sing song out their lines for no other reason than that's how it's done. In love with the sound of their own voices, ending every line going up, every single line going up, as they read and read and read. See declarative sentences that in prose would go down, in poetry seem to go up, as if it adds some kind of hidden meaning. I know what I'm talking about, and you should too. And I am not afraid to shout with anger and intensity and long dramatic pauses fraught with angst. And I am not afraid to use that one requisite swear word that lets you know I am fucking serious, man. And the words, the vocabulary words, Galaconian, dystemic, irrepentia, thrown in to remind you I am a writer, eat my verbal dust. My PhD, dust. And then the end, spoken softly, hauntingly tender, though not devoid of irony, and yet ending abruptly, as if there is more. How? That, at a poetry reading, you always discover, poets are always, I do it myself, always looking for opportunities to teach the audience great new words. I taught you the word germane just about 4.5 minutes ago. It was longer than that. 8.5 minutes. And so I wanted to put in that line, and the words, the vocabulary words, dystemic, Galaconian, irrepentia. What I needed in the poem right there, I needed the 3 biggest SAT vocabulary words. I mean, not like plethora. Duh. Everybody learns plethora when they're studying for the SAT the first time, when they only get 600. I needed something bigger than plethora. bigger than excoriate. What did I do? Why did I decide on those 3 words? I needed 3 words that no one had, that no one in the audience would know. How did I find them? Raise your hand. Yes?
Dictionary.com.
There was no such thing as the internet then.
Wait, when did you write that?
1990.
Oh.
And there was, but you had to be in the Defense Department. Yes, I made them up.
Okay.
Dystemic. That's my favorite. Dystemic. The poem has a very dystemic tone to it. Draconian sounds like draconian, right? Do you know the word draconian?
Yes.
We find that punishment, sir, to be a little bit draconian. And dystemic sounds like systemic. We need systemic change here. And irrepsentelia, I don't know where I came up with that. Yeah, the only way I could make sure that nobody had heard the words was to make them up myself. Which reminds me of the fact I went to a really good school in New York City. Where, I mean, we had a couple of kids who got double 800s on their SATs. And just smarty pants all over the place. And we had this one teacher in 8th grade whose name, unfortunately, was Mr. Gross. And it became obvious to many of us that he was nowhere near as smart as even the dumbest kid in our class. And so we would torture him by coming up with, by using words that didn't exist to see whether he would call us out. Because a smart person should say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what that word means. Did you say germane? I've never heard that word. What does that mean? Have a little confidence in your own. You're about to learn a new word, right? Nothing wrong with that. But we would say, Mr. Gross, don't you find the end of the novel is somewhat rotate? And he would go, really? Yeah, well, no, many critics have said that. but what makes you say so? How did I get onto that? Okay. Yes, so just the one line of Mary Oliver's poem leads me to believe that some of the people who read The Black Walnut Tree did it in a very, this is the way we used to read poetry in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. The Black Walnut Tree by Mary Oliver. And so I decided to shake it up and read it by using my, I mean, I could have either done it, The Black Walnut Tree by Mary Oliver. But here's the other weird thing, is that you've got 350 teachers all in this airplane hangar grading tests, but everybody was in the same room, divided by curtains, and only 120 are grading the essay that Leah's grading. So when the leader of that group wants to speak to them, he rings a bell, and everybody puts these closed-circuit headphones on, and the person up at the table goes, raise your hand if you can hear me. And everybody raises their hand. And this is so as not to disturb the other people who are grading other essays, who have a similar system over there, but I guess it's on different channels. Or no. Nobody's making an announcement at the same time. Is that what it was?
No, there's headphones. You have to, they ring a bell. It's like Pavlov's dog. And you put these headphones on, and then the leader speaks into a
Yeah, but you could, if you heard a bell on the other side of the airplane hangar, you could listen to somebody else's announcement, right?
No, because it is a different channel.
Different channel.
But they can hear people when they laugh.
Yes.
Like collectively.
That's right. That's right. So I decided to do it with Christopher Walken, and I have a decent Christopher Walken, and I used it in a poem called My Wife Knows That I'm Interested in Making Love with Her every time I start talking in the voice of Christopher Walken. It's not even true. I want to have sex with you all the time. It's crazy. Yes, I did it. But poems should be passive, decent, halfway decent imitation of a Tibetan throat singing chant, put it in a poem. Or two. I did a poem called Miracle Workers in the first assembly. Would you find a poem in here called When the Monks Came to Kripalu? You know Kripalu Yoga Center up in Lenox? These Tibetan monks came to Kripalu. I had already taught myself how to do this Tibetan throat singing chant, so I went to go see them. And this was another opportunity for me to use my Tibetan throat singing in a poem. Did you find it? It's totally not in there. It's like totally not in there. Did you find it? When the monks came to chant at Kripalu, so did the thunder. I had seen the lightning in the distance, even prayed for rain. And when the chant master raised his hand, so as to feel the song's rumble in his fingers, and the thunder chose that moment to rip a rainless clap. Ask me about that line. To rip a rainless clap. When the thunder chose that moment to rip a rainless clap, I wonder if it came to lend its crackling tumble to his song. The lead monk would always put his hand up like that and go, Afterward, outside, still with no rain, I saw him watching the lightning and joined him. Holding my hand like this, I did my best to sound like thunder, and he smiled and pointed to my throat, then to my heart. I drove right home, straight into the lightning, chanting in the car. I sang as far into the thunder as I could, from my throat and lower, finally reaching home the moment the rain came down. I sometimes do a little micro karate bow at the end of a poem, because if the ending of the poem is not clear, this clues it in. The poem is over, it is okay to clap. I run a series in New York City on the third Wednesday of every non-summer month, road trip leader, called Page Meets Stage, where the Pulitzer Prize meets the Poetry Slam, where I take a Pulitzer Prize-winning, academic, page-oriented poet, and I put them on stage with a more performance-oriented poet. And they read back and forth, poem for poem. It's not a competition. It's an ongoing conversation about where poetry exists, on the page or in the air at the moment it's spoken. And what I found is academic poets, you often don't know when their poems are over. Like that poem, I Think I Could Be a Poet, and then the end, spoken softly, hauntingly tender, though not devoid of irony, and yet ending abruptly, as if there is more. Thank you. This next poem. And people are like, wait, what? That's the... And then give me a, and then they do a golf clap. Here, I'm going to finish, and you give me a golf clap, okay? And then the end, spoken softly, hauntingly tender, though not devoid of irony, and yet ending abruptly, as if there is more. Thank you. Thank you. No, please, you don't have to clap. An academic poet will often say that. You don't have to clap. But the reason they say that is because nobody's ever sure when to clap. And the academic poet doesn't know if they read with a little bit more energy, or maybe wrote with a little bit more oomph. They could write that little karate bow into the bottom, into the end of their poem. perform a poem, you want the audience to know this is the end of the poem, this is a great line, not only is it appropriate to clap, I want to clap. If they don't know it's the end, they're not going to want to clap. If they don't think it's appropriate to clap, they're not going to. If it is appropriate, but they don't want to because the poem wasn't good enough, then they won't. I write my poems about my own life experience, so don't ask me where do I get my ideas from, because it's not greatideas.com or dictionary.com. Keats said, beauty is truth and truth is beauty. That is all you know on earth and all you need to know. And sometimes when I'm teaching a poetry workshop, never when it has 100 students in it though, I will say, take 5 minutes and write me the most beautiful thing you can. Because I believe what Keats was saying is, the most beautiful thing you can write carries with it its own truth. And the opposite is certainly true as well. The most truthful thing you can commit to paper carries with it its own beauty. And the older I get, the more I try to simply tell the truth. The plainest, most direct way of telling the truth. Because it's when I'm trying to write poetry that the poetry gets in the way. Sometimes I'm teaching a class and I'll say, all right, everybody write a line that begins with, I should probably tell you. And everyone's like, oh great, I know exactly what I'm going to say. I should probably. And then somebody goes, wait, does this have to be a poem? And I'll say, what would you do differently if I said yes? I'd make it pretty. I'd use big words like germane. Well then, no, don't make it a poem. Tell me the truth. I should probably tell you. And then tell me something that we need to know. Tell me something important. Take a risk. I knew my parents were going to get divorced when somebody's about to reveal something there. That line, I wondered when, if the thunder chose that moment to rip a rainless clap. That was just a fun way of saying that day up in the Berkshires, that you could tell if there's going to be a big storm. And there was thunder and there was lightning for about half an hour before the rain came. And the thunder chose the moment that the guy goes, moo, and we hear, and all these rich, crunchy vegetarians up in Kripalu went, did you notice the thunder started? It's like he was calling the thunder. I was one of them. And I wrote a freaking poem about it. Rip a rainless clap. It's just a more interesting way of saying, I wonder if, when the thunder started, it came to lend its tumbling grumble to his song. Sometimes when you tell students, take 5 minutes and write me the most truthful assessment of your own life right now that you can, they start to cry. When you do the opposite one, when you say, take 5 minutes and write me the most beautiful thing you can, what's the danger? When a teenager aims for beauty, what's the danger? What's the pitfall? I tell you to write the most beautiful thing you can. If I were to do that right now, I'm not. Write me the most beautiful sentence you have ever written. What's the danger that you would end up with? Yes?
Losing the truth. Oh, sorry.
Did you both say the same thing?
I don't know.
What did you say in the back?
Losing the truth.
What did you say? Something but...
Losing the truth.
Losing the truth. And the other guy said...
Cliche.
Cliche was the answer I was looking for. would also lose the truth. So I'll give you 1 Molly point, which is worth nothing, but good to have. For the guy who said cliche, I'm going to give you 5 Molly points, which are worth nothing, but good to have nevertheless. It's not a competition. You would totally be winning. Yeah, when a teenager, or anybody for that matter, when you aim for beauty, the danger is you're going to end up with cliche. The golden, no. The billowy, no. As the sunset, oh, I just vomited a bit in the back of my head. The older I get, there's very little difference between being honest and truthful and being beautiful. I'm going to take a sip of water, and I'm waiting for the first hand to go up. It's now the time for you to ask me intelligent questions. I'm going to call you Jermaine unless I know what your name is.
Ashley.
Ashley. Go.
Can you do your poem, The Egyptian Death Position?
Did you buy my book and read that?
No, we studied it in class.
Oh. The Egyptian death position. When I get to the part of the poem where I say that I called this position, which is me lying in bed, little did I know that later on I would discover this is an actual relaxation technique. You know, you get yourself, imagine me lying in bed, also wearing pajamas. I would get so that no part of my body was touching any other part of my body, and then I would sort of take an inventory of my entire body, relaxing my toes and every go up. That's what, like, various relaxation techniques. But I called it the Egyptian death po, like I was on a first syllable basis with the word position. But that's just dumb, so I didn't put it in the poem. But I'll say it. I'll say it. The Egyptian death po. Rarely at night was falling asleep ever a problem for me, but still, nights when the next day was bigger than usual, I lay in the valley of my horsehair mattress, listening to the traffic on Park Avenue, and began a strange ritual. They actually used to make mattresses out of horsehair. Some of you may live in old Connecticut farmhouses that still have horsehair mattresses before they had complicated springs or Tempur-Pedic materials. They would take horse tails, I think, and manes, and stuff it as wiry hair. And after a year, you would get this valley. And I would lie in my bed, and there was no way I could ever roll out of my bed, because to either side is like rolling uphill. I lay in the valley of my horsehair mattress. If I were writing this today, I'm not sure I would include that line. It takes too hard to explain. It'd have to be somebody in the class who's like, yeah, I think they actually used to make mattresses out of horsehair, and what the persona is saying here is that he has been lying in, he obviously comes from a family that believes in horsehair mattresses like my mother did. On my back, I straightened myself out completely. Head cocked, needed uncocking, hips unshifted, unakimboed elbows, knees unbent, and fingers. Nothing touched nothing, and I worked at total stillness until it seemed that even breathing required more effort than I wanted to spend. I didn't try to die, but if I could have stopped my heart, I might have tried. It was the Egyptian death po, even though I never said those words out loud, even to myself, until now. I lay there, unmoving, and thought of nothing. Not the cars, my brother sleeping in the next bed over, my parents in the next room loving each other, my sisters away at boarding school, Elma dreaming of Jamaica in the maid's room, the red front door, our dog, the red rug in the giant playroom where I kissed the lips of the woman I would marry 25 years later, Didn't think about sex or even girls, their hair and their lips, their beautiful eyes, and the mystery of what they don't have. Ancient history, the pyramids, the pharaohs, the mummy I was imitating, even the Temple of Dendur, recently brought over from Egypt block by block and reassembled in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in a special wing of mostly glass, so that even at night you could see it with the lights on inside. I lay in my bed like that, like the stones of a temple, heavy resting stones so far away from their home. Gosh, I'm glad I didn't have to study that in English. I would use that as an opportunity to get the class to start talking about bizarre nighttime go-to-sleep rituals. Do you have one that's appropriate you can share? Like, you know, counting sheep. Nobody does that. Yeah, sure. Tell me how you go to sleep. Is there a certain thought that keeps you up, or is there?
Probably, I don't know.
I'm going to come back to you because there was a hand here.
I said play the didgeridoo.
You play the didgeridoo to help you go to sleep?
It calms you down.
How does that work?
It just zones me out.
What about other people? Is there a certain thought? Is there a photograph in your room that at night with the lights off you can see the reflection of a street lamp that you can't actually see out the window? Yes? You?
I have this very weird ritual that every night.
It has to be appropriate.
Yeah, it is. Every night I would have to lay on my side. I think I start on my right. Then I'd wait a few minutes, and then I'd be like, oh, I gotta turn over to my other side. And I turn over to my other side, and then I think, no, the other way is better. And then I go back, and then I fall asleep. And then I wake up a little bit, check my alarm clock, roll over, wait a few minutes, roll back over.
That's not that weird.
I can't figure out, okay, I always sleep on this side. No, I have to start on that side and then say, yeah.
It's okay. You go one way. It's fine.
I go on Tumblr on my phone, so I can't stand it.
You go on Tumblr? That's not going to help you. They say keep the screens, like, avoid the screens. I just have one more cup of coffee, and it totally zones me out. Ask me another question, but not requesting me to read the poem. Yes?
Can you explain your...
My Michelle Obama bags? First Lady of Fabulous. I bought them at a company called Blue Q up in the Berkshires. Actually, no, Blue Q sells these great bags online, and they hire a bunch of differently abled people to work there. And every month or so, the owner of the company brings in somebody to entertain the employees. So I went in there, and he didn't give me any money, but he let me take some Michelle Obama bags. Question about poetry, not about Michelle Obama. Yes?
What was one of the most important things Billy Collins taught you?
You know that he's my hero and mentor? Billy Collins and I read at the very first Page Meets Stage reading in 2005. And in preparation for that, I went up to him and said, oh, by the way, Mr. Collins, how do you prepare? How do you rehearse for your readings? And he said, I don't. Because one reading is rehearsal for the next. After all, the poem exists here in the book, and how I read it on any given night is almost incidental. And that's when I knew that he and I could come to poetry from completely different angles. Because for me, the poem exists here, in the moment that I'm reciting it, and how it looks on the page is almost incidental. And that's why there are so many spoken word poets and slam poets who are dynamic performers, but they don't know how to break a line, and their poems look like crap when you read them. So the goal is to be interesting on this surface, but have skills so that your work will hold up on this surface as well. But to answer your question in a more honest way, Billy Collins, first of all, he hates the fact that everybody says, oh, your poems are so accessible. If he were Hester Prynne, that's what his scarlet letter would stand for. That's what his A would stand for, accessible. And he says once, he's told me once that he's always tempted when he gets introduced as being the most accessible poet in America to go up and do these utterly opaque and obfuscatory poems that nobody can decipher. But he did say he likes to use humor in his work, and I agree. He said, I use humor to invite the reader or the audience member into my poem. And then once they are inside the poem, I close and lock the door and pull out the sharp knives. That's what Billy Collins said. He murders his readers. He brings them in using humor. But it's true that if your poem is all heaviness all the time, people start to zone out. So I try to mix a little bit of humor, a little bit of irreverence, because it makes the rest of people say, oh my God, he said that? What's he going to say next? These are good. Anything else? Yes?
What keeps you performing?
Pardon me?
What keeps you performing?
What keeps me performing? The threat of having to get a real job. I stop. This is awesome. And although I don't, you're next. Although I don't get to teach daily, I don't get to see the difference that I make in the lives of my students from September to June. I've never stopped teaching, even though I said goodbye to my 6th grade in the year 2000. And I haven't had health insurance, except for that which I buy myself. I haven't had employer-sponsored health insurance for 13 years. That's a bummer. God, if Obamacare had been around when I quit teaching, and the website had actually worked, I would. But I get to teach. I still teach. I mean, I get to teach all over the place. And I get to teach, I just have a different type of classroom. I could argue that I'm teaching right now. Yes?
Why did you decide to become a slam poet?
Because I could. Because it looked like I was going to be at a place where my avocation could become my vocation. And that's a wonderfully rare thing. When you get to quit your day job because the band's going on tour. When the band is good enough for you to quit your day job, give it a shot. Try it. You don't want to be on your deathbed and say, there was a chance, there was a brief moment there in the year 2000 where if I'd had any guts at all, I would have tried to see whether I could have been a full-time artist. Now, that said, I didn't set out to be a full-time slam poet. Slams were just something I was going to do. You go to a slam, if you're lucky, you win $50. So I needed to line up more lucrative gigs than that. But in 1998, I was teaching at the Browning School, and this guy who had seen me at the National Poetry Slam the year before said, what would it take for you to leave your class next week and come to the University of North Dakota on a Thursday night? And it was April, and I realized it's not a good time of year for me to leave my class. April, very busy time, right? Cramming for exams. So I said, I can't do it. And he said, I'll give you $1,000. I said, no, I really, it's not a question of the money. I can't do it. I'll come to you in the summer. It's like, I don't want you in the summer. I want you when my students are here. I'll give you $1,500. I said, No, it's not a question. $2,000! They say that the best way to negotiate is to really not want the thing. Then the price either goes up or goes down. So when I hung up the phone, I had still said, I really can't do it. Try me next year. It had been, he had stopped at $2,000. It's a little bit awkward for someone whose most famous poem is about, how dare you judge me by what I make as a teacher. But when I hung up the phone, I thought, a poet could get $2,000 for a single night of poetry? I make $28,000. If I get 14 readings in a year, 15, I top my teacher salary? I gotta try this. So 18 months later, I decided I was gonna give it a year. And if I could pay the mortgage and put food on the table as a poet, I would try it another year. How did I discover slam is a question you didn't ask. But in graduate school, in Kansas, ironically, the year that I left Oakland, California to go to Kansas for graduate school was 1990. That fall was the first National Poetry Slam ever. Slam was invented in Chicago by a construction worker named Mark Smith in 1986. Whenever his name is mentioned, you're supposed to say, so what? So I'm going to say it again. The Poetry Slam was invented in the late 1980s by a Chicago construction worker named Mark Smith. So what? That's what everybody does when they hear his name. Now that you know, you will do it as well. And he that shall not be named, not Voldemort, the other guy, had gone to a poetry reading, and it had all been boring poets talking about otherness. Blood, the stone of my life. Mother, mother, you hate love. Love that is not blood of stone. Bird, quick, quick, said the fire of the... What? And he had thought, this has nothing to do with the lives of ordinary people. I'm going to put together my own reading. So we put together this special reading, and at the end of the night, he said, hey, we still got some time before we have to relinquish the theater to the next, the stage to the next group. Let's have all the poets who read tonight come up and do one more piece, and they'll be judged by the audience. And he found that that was the most dynamic part of the show. So the next month, he put together a similar show, and that's all they did. And they gave out scorecards. And audiences, they dropped the high, they dropped the low, they developed the rules. 5 points for literary merit, 5 points for performance. We dropped the high, dropped the low. And people love the concept of assigning a cold, hard number to a poem. And all those people are like, how are you going to judge me? These are my feelings. Watch me, 5.1. That was about my grandfather. It was a son. You obviously didn't love your grandfather. Write a better poem. And everybody who left the stage in tears saying, this has been a horrible experience. I'll never write poetry again. Mark would say, if you're going to let a bunch of drunk people dissuade you from writing a poem, good riddance. Poetry didn't want to count you among its ranks anyway. You had to have a thick skin. I would have discovered the Poetry Slam in 1990 if I had not gone to graduate school. It would have been a huge mistake. So much happier the way things worked out. But here I am in Kansas. It's 2 years later, and one of the professors on my master's committee says, have you heard about this thing they do in Lawrence, Kansas? I went to Kansas State, which is in Manhattan, Kansas. The Wildcats, not the Jayhawks. He said, have you heard about this thing they do in Lawrence? It's called a Poetry Slam. I said, that sounds stupid. What is it? He said, they apparently you read your poem, and it's better if it's memorized, and drunk people, drunk racist idiots give you scores. That sounds awesome. So I went and I did it, and I realized that this is the perfect marriage of my skills. What else? Yes?
How much of an editing process is it for each poem?
I have a new poem called My Revision Process. It goes something like this. I write all of my poems in a notebook made from recycled playing cards. And then I type them into the computer and I print them on very fine tissue paper. It's like onion skin. And then I turn the paper over and I try to trace the letters on the back side of the paper using an ink I make myself out of ash and my own tears. Then I fold each poem up into a paper airplane and I attempt to throw it over the open flame of a small beeswax candle that I buy at an artisanal shop down on Commercial Street. And if a poem turns into a real airplane as it passes over the flame and flies away, or if it catches fire and burns up, I generally assume that the poem is ready to be published, and I have to try to remember how it goes. But if it lands on the other side of the flame, then it needs to be edited, so I bake some French bread, and I use the poems to wrap up warm buns. And then I go and I give them to homeless people on the street to read and to eat, to see if they have any comments. So that's just a total mockery of I was teaching this summer at a teenage writing workshop, and one of the poets talked about his revision process, and it was so involved that I wrote that poem because I was jealous of his hard work, and also to mock him a little bit. I have a moleskin journal. A lot of times they start out handwritten, and I do write in cursive. I love my. I don't have neat handwriting, but I write in script. I like that. I often don't delineate. I don't worry about line breaks. I'm just writing prose, trying to get the truth of my experience. I'm working on a poem now, and the first line is going to be, once I destroyed a room full of black folks because when Marquise asked me what the first thing that went through my head when I saw a New York City police car was, I told him it was, oh good, the police are here. Now nothing can go wrong. Black people find that funnier than white people do. I was asked that, and Marquise goes, yo, Taylor, honestly, you see a cop, what's the first thing that goes through your head? I said, oh good, the police are here, now nothing can go wrong. Hysterical. And but the poem's going to go on to say that the most racist thing that I do on a regular basis is say nothing every time I see an African-American kid throw litter on the street. Even, excuse me, could you pick that up and put it in the trash can, is a conversation I never think is going to end well. But if I ever see a white kid do the same thing, when race looks as though it is not a factor, because I'm talking to a little white kid, I excoriate the child. How dare you! I'm working on this poem, and I haven't gotten to delineating it yet. Probably shouldn't have even shared what I have so far. But like that line, once I destroyed a room full of black folk, before you realize that I'm talking about laughter, that they busted out in laughter, I absolutely shattered the room into laughter. Do I want you to be thinking other things? Yes, of course. Billy Collins said that a poet is someone who is never content to mean only one thing. I'd rather mean two things. 3 is better. I wrote a dirty joke that works on 3 levels badly. You want to hear it? If I never get invited back, it'll be because of this joke. What do you call it when you send via text a picture of 2 mosquitoes having sex to your own sister? Insexed. See? 3 levels. 3 levels! It's a bad joke on 3 levels. Better make that a 4.
I'm remembering that.
When the poem gets typed out is often when I play around with delineation. I thank God that I live in the age of the word processor. Some of my teachers, Thomas Watson, said, "You guys don't know how easy you have it. You used to have to type out a poem, and if you thought maybe you wanted to move a word to the next line, you had to retype the whole poem." So there's a lot of editing that happens when it's a computer file. But because I'm a spoken word poet, I can never consider a poem to be done until I've read it out loud in front of an audience. To me, performance is part of the editing process. I'll give you an example. There's a poem that I have about playing Scrabble with a dyslexic student named Eddie, which I almost recited in one of the assemblies, but I couldn't remember how it began, so I switched it up. The first time I ever performed that poem, 2 things happened. One, there's a line where I start imitating what a dyslexic kid would see when he looks at the word read. All the R, the E, and the A are all going to mix and spell different words for him. And so I did this line, and nobody got what I was doing. And so you'll see when I perform the poem right now that to fix that error of performance, when an error of performance is when you say a line and you know, nobody got that. And there are 2 things you can do to a poet like me. One, you change the way you perform it, so that people would get some kind of clue. Or, Billy Collins would never agree with this, you go back and you change the line. You write the poem in a different way. Many page poets would say, "I'm not going to change a word of my poem just because a bunch of drunk people didn't get it. If you don't catch my allusion to Dante's Inferno, you need to read more widely." Whereas I would say, if the success of my poem is contingent upon your knowledge of Dante's Inferno, there better be other things in the poem that are easier to get. So you'll see at one point in the poem, I changed the way I performed it to clue the audience in to how to understand the line. And then at the end of the poem, the first time I performed it, the audience let me know that is the perfect ending of the poem. Because they laughed and they clapped and they thought, "That is awesome!" Little did they know, that's not where I thought the poem was going to end. I still had a short stanza that I thought was important. What was I going to do? Go, "No, no, no, shh, quiet, wait, there's more." Luckily, I had the presence of mind to realize, oh, that's the ending. And I walked off stage. It was the best edit. So here's the poem. Playing Scrabble with Eddie. Despite his dyslexia, or perhaps because of it, Eddie can beat every other 8th grader in Scrabble. Kick their ass, in fact, and he knows it, though he can't say it. At least not in my 8th grade, because if he said ass in my 8th grade, I would give him a detention on the spot. See, Scrabble was made for his mind. Show him a rack of 7 tiles, and he could tell you in an instant 10 words that use some combination of those letters. His mind is hardwired for confusion, for the jangling clangor of consonants and discombobulating vowels. But ask him to spell those 10 words, and he may dare to read deer when the word reads dread. That's what this is at. The first time I did that, I said, ask him to spell those 10 words, and he may dare to read dear when the word reads dread. You know, and everyone was like, what? If you read that poem in my first book, not this one, you would see it's all spelled out in capital letters. And any reader would go, oh, I see. Those are all anagrams of each other, except for dread, which has an extra D. He may dare to read dear when the word reads dread. Combine dyslexia with hyperactivity, which now we call ADD, attention deficit disorder, though Eddie impishly says DDA, da-da. 15 grams of Ritalin dispensed by the nurse twice daily, an IQ of 162, and all the hormones of a 13-year-old boy, just dying for an education. And you have yourself one horny, whacked-out 8th grade genius staring at the 7 tiles on his rack as if only getting them all in the right order was going to unlock all the secrets of the language. Eddie stares at my face, at the board, at his rack, at the board, at my face, and I wonder what his dyslexic, rearranging mind is doing now with my eyes and my ears and my nose. How many one-eyed, Picasso-faced English teachers are staring back at him from the educated audience of his adolescence? How many monsters can he spell with my face? But here comes the word. K-C-U-F. Cuff. Eddie, I think I'm going to have to challenge you on this word, cuff. And Eddie reddens. Eddie reddens like I finally caught the, Eddie reddens like he finally got the punchline to a dirty joke, which, in a way, he has. Eddie reddens like I finally caught him swearing in school, which, in a way, I haven't yet. And the letters pivot around the K. C, U, F. Oh! Well, that's different, Eddie. Is that okay, Mr. Molly? Is that okay, Eddie? Is that word okay? You got the F on a double letter square. You got the K on triple word. That's 51 points, young man. Way to go. Excellent, says Eddie. I'm going to kick your ass. And so I give him a detention on the spot. There's more. What is up with that, says Eddie. How come I can play the word fuck on the board and that is okay, but as soon as I say ass, you give me a detention? And I said to Eddie, it's all about the appropriateness of language, young man. It's all about the appropriateness of language. See, that would have been so dumb. When I gave him the detention, everyone said, that's a great ending, and they come out. So that's part of my ending process. When does this class end? Oh, 2, great. I'm going to give you an idea for an exercise. Right? Even the name of this exercise is top secret, because if I tell you the whole name of it, it loses its power. I can tell you the beginning. It's called Walking Backwards into a Poem. And I start by saying that poetry needs to be filled with more things you can touch. When teenagers write poetry, when anyone starts to write, we want our writing to be universal and accessible to broad, different kinds of people. And beginning writers think that the way to make their writing universal is to take all the specific details out of it. Write about general themes. And that's the quickest way to bore people. The opposite is true. The more specific, hard details that you can put in your writing, that's what makes it memorable. And even if you say, I once had a teacher named Mrs. Keithline who, when she got mad, little bits of white spit would form in the corners of her mouth. People who never had a teacher named Mrs. Keithline, who never had noticed that when certain people talk, spit forms in the corners of their mouth. They're going to say, I see it. And that's what you want readers to be saying. I see that. And it reminds me of something else. Let's see where she's going to go with this. Fill your writing with things you can touch. So here's how this exercise goes. I first say, Think of something that you can touch and hold in your hands that is in your bedroom, that's not electronic and not sports related. I don't want people to choose an iPhone or some sort of Game Boy thing. And I don't want the jocks to say, I decided to choose one of my 7 trophies for awesomeness. A poem is a terrible place to brag about how awesome you are. I already know you're awesome. That's why I don't care. A poem is a great place to celebrate the ways in which you fall short of being the person you want to be, which is why I write poems about the most racist thing I think I do on a regular basis is criticize white kids for things I see all kinds of kids doing. I wish I did. Think about a thing, an object you can hold in your hand. Have you thought about one? What would yours be? A ceramic turtle. Where'd you get it?
I think I got it from.
So you would start your sentence by saying, in my room I have a ceramic turtle. And you would describe it a little bit in just a couple of sentences, focusing on the ways in which it is not perfect. If it's a musical instrument you've chosen, talk about how the lacquer is cracked or how it doesn't stay in tune. Have you thought about an object?
Yeah.
What would yours be?
Sweatshirt.
A sweatshirt? What does it say on it?
Basketball.
Might be sports related. Are you a basketball player yourself? Does it have any rips in it?
No, the back. Like, you know when you wear something a lot?
Yes.
Like it's like the little.
Pills?
Yeah.
It's pilly? Say it. It's pilly. That's the word. Not to be embarrassed. That's the actual word. It's pilly. A pilly sweatshirt. Do you wear it a lot? Is it clean? It would work better for this if it was dirty. Okay, it's all right. Have you thought of an object? What would yours be?
Picture.
A picture? Of whom? Oh, is one of them dead? Is the glass cracked? It doesn't have any grass in it. That can work. That can work. Maybe it used to have glass. You get an object you can touch in your hand. You describe it in a couple of ways. Oh, you have to not use personal pronouns, and you're gonna use the word my, which is a personal pronoun. So I would probably say pick something else. Pick something else. You can say a postcard tucked into the side of an antique mirror. White houses on the side of a blue Mediterranean, blah, blah. Part 2 of this assignment is to say where you wrote once I used to have a, or I own a, cross that out, and instead write the words I am a. So you, I am a sweatshirt. Pilly from where? What a great phrase that is. I am a sweatshirt. I am a dirty sweatshirt with a permanent, you know when you have those, when you hang something up and then you take it off and it's got that. I am a dirty sweatfurt. Y'all don't know about sweatfurts. When you get to college, it's a thing. I am a dirty sweatshirt, pilly from where? I am a ceramic turtle with brown, which is to say the color of earth, chipped like nails. I am a picture frame with no glass. But you can't say my parents. That's why it doesn't work. I am a picture of my what? And I call it walking backwards into a metaphor. Because you just turned an image into a metaphor. Enjoy the day. Bye-bye.